Alright everyone, welcome back. So we're just continuing from that last lecture where we started writing our for loop. So here we have our for loop. We have I defined as 1, and then we keep going for the length of our array. So the length of our children array. And we add 1 to I on each iteration. So let's go ahead and open this loop up, and let's paste our code into it. So I'm just going to cut that out with Control X, and then paste it into here. Right, so now we're looping through and we're adding an image to our gallery each time. Right now we're just grabbing that first item in the array each time. So we want to replace this 0 with our I variable, which gets updated on every iteration. So we loop through those threads and we add a different image each time, like you see here. The one problem here is that it's trying to add images for posts that do not have one. And so we get this broken link icon, like you see here, and then also a whole bunch down here as well. So we have to test whether the thumbnail key exists before we try and add an image to our gallery. So we can do that here. We'll just add an if statement. So if image data is equal to null, then let's skip that iteration. Otherwise, let's add the image like we did before. So let's just cut that and paste this into our else block. And that's the basic setup. So instead of skip, JavaScript has something called the continue statement that we can use to skip the current iteration. So it's just as simple as writing continue. And what this will do is jump back to the top here and update our condition. So it will just add one more to our I variable and then continue the loop. This way, any Reddit posts that do not have a thumbnail image will be skipped, and we'll be left with a div element that contains a bunch of images, which are added using this piece of code here. And instead of a null, posts that do not have a thumbnail still have a thumbnail key, but the value of it is self or default. So self or default seems to contain the URL to the default thumbnail for posts, so that's something like what you see here, so like these things here. And let me see if I can find an example here. So you see this thumbnail here, it still has a value, but it's set to self. So we want to test if the value is set to self, and if it is, then we'll continue and skip that current iteration. So that's quite simple to implement. So instead of testing if it's equal to null, we want to test if it's equal to self. And I'm just going to copy this. And we also want to test if it's equal to default, because some images are also set to default instead of self, and either of these keys will give us a broken link. So if we encounter these here, skip that iteration, otherwise add the image to our gallery. So if we zoom back out here, you'll see that now we have our image gallery with all the images and no broken links. And there we have it. This is actually it for this course here, sorry, for this lecture here. But I'm going to go ahead and continue and add some extra styling to our app here to make it a bit more interesting. So first off, I'm going to be using Flexbox, which lets you lay out things quite nicely in your app. And in the next lecture, I'll provide some links and extra information about Flexbox if you're interested in learning more about it and don't really know what it is. So let's start by wrapping each image in its own div. So I'm going to zoom in for you again. And we can just simply add an opening div tag here before our image, and then after our image tag add that closing div tag. So now each of our images are wrapped in their own div element. And now let's expand this CSS section here and add some styles. So I'm going to add some styles to our gallery. I'm going to set the display, the display to flex and the flex flow to row wrap. Setting display to flex means that the gallery div is now a flex container and its children are subject to whatever flex context we define. So we can do things like change the direction and wrapping of the child divs in our container. We set the flex direction to row, so the images are displayed left to right, and we make them wrap so they are pushed to a new row once they reach the container width. So now for our gallery divs, so these are the individual divs that contain the images. We want to set the flex to auto. And this basically tells the children, this basically tells the child flex items to evenly distribute themselves in the container and take up the appropriate width and height. And then finally, we'll just add a bit more styles. I'll give some extra margin here, something small, 0.2 EM. And then we'll give the images some styles as well. So 3 pixels solid orange. And finally, I'll set a background color here, something neutral like gray. And let me just zoom back out so we can have a look at this. And there we go. It's a bit less boring, not just plain black and white background. And now we're actually all done. If you want, you can further modify this to have the images clickable and have the link take you to the URL of the post. You can do this on your own if you want. You can play around with the data you get from this JSON URL here. Or you can even add your own styles and make it a bit more better looking. But I'm going to end the lecture here, and I'll see you in the next one.